If you are hearing this, it means someone asked me to put what happened into words. I can do that. What I cannot do is make you believe it. In the first 30 seconds of this operation, we thought we were walking toward a narco cache. By the third minute after we made contact, the first man was opened across the chest like a zipper, and the forest went quiet again, as if it had swallowed the scream. My name is Mateo Galvin. At the time, I was a soldier assigned to field operations in the Sierra. I had done raids, sweeps, long patrols that end with dust in your teeth and sweat salt in your eyes. This one sounded ordinary. Command said there was constant movement among the trees. A route used to watch dirt roads that fed into other zones. The target was a base where a cell stored weapons and supplies. The map had a circle and not much else. Sargento Avila led our element. He was a calm man with a way of making his silence feel like an order. He tightened our spacing when the brush thickened and reminded us that the mountains punish shortcuts. Cabo Pineda was near me in the file, always glancing up, then down, then back again, as if the forest had more than one floor. Soldado Ortega walked behind us, tense and eager, the kind of young energy that mistakes confidence for protection. We climbed on a narrow trail. The sun was up, but the canopy broke the light into thin strips that slid over trunks and our sleeves. The first thing I noticed was what I did not hear. No insect hum, no birds calling, even the wind seemed muffled. The first time your instincts whisper, you either listen or you learn later why they whispered. My radio crackled once, then twice, bursts of static that came in a pattern. I tapped the casing and shifted the antenna away from my vest. Sierra ridges chew signals. I told myself the rhythm was coincidence, that my brain was making shapes out of noise. Fear begins when you give the unknown a voice. After a long climb, Avila raised a fist. Ahead, a thin line of smoke was rising between the crowns. Not a strong column, just a faint thread, like a fire that had almost decided to die. Avila pointed, and we moved to circle. Boots pressed into dry litter, and every step threatened a crack. I remember a faint metallic sweetness in the air, mixed with ash. The smell you get near a burned-out pit, except sharper, like something had been cooked too long. We reached a small clearing and found 3 crude huts, old wood tied with rope, built fast and meant to be temporary. A fire pit sat in the middle, with embers barely alive, breathing smoke that drifted sideways instead of up. There were no backpacks, no plastic jugs, no ammunition boxes, no radios, no trash. A narco camp always leaves human clutter. This place looked cleaned, not abandoned. Avila signaled us to search. I took the hut on the left. At the entrance, several small cloth pouches hung from a beam. Plain fabric, simple knots. I brushed one lightly and felt something hard inside knock against itself. The sound was dull, like stones or bone. I did not open it. In the field, you learn a rule that is never written in manuals. If something is meant to be touched, it will not be waiting for you like a baited hook. Inside, a table had been made from 2 planks set on cut logs. On it sat skulls arranged in a neat row, human skulls. Real. Not decorative. The bone had weight and stain. Beneath the table, the dirt floor held long bones and smaller fragments, cleaned in a way that suggested deliberate work. The smell in the hut was the ash smell again, stronger, and under it something that reminded me of wet pennies. On the inner walls were dark lines, not words I recognized, more like repeated star shapes and hooked loops, drawn with dried paint or burned residue. I forced myself not to stare too long. The longer you look at a symbol you do not understand, the more it starts to look like it understands you. I backed out and looked for Avila. He was checking the middle hut with 2 men. Pineda murmured that he found nothing criminal. No phones, no drugs, no weapons. Another soldier shook his head the same way. Avila made a small gesture for us to keep quiet, and we gathered near the dying fire, listening. The clearing offered no voices, no movement, just the faint crackle of embers. Then we heard footsteps behind the huts, slow, dragging over dirt, careful and steady. I turned and saw several old women emerge from the trees. They moved with bent backs and stiff legs, some with canes, some with hands on their own thighs. Their skin was wrinkled. What froze me were their eyes, completely black without shine, like holes cut into a face. Their nails were long, thick, and curved, longer than any human nails should be, and they clicked softly when their hands flexed. One of them stepped forward and spoke in a clear, strong voice. This zone was not ours. We would not cross farther. The words landed like a rule, spoken by someone who expects obedience from the world. My radio crackled again in 2 short pulses. I told myself, it is the terrain. It is only the terrain. Avila lifted his rifle, not pointing at her chest. Just ready. The old woman did not blink. Avila spoke without raising his voice. We are passing through. He used the tone he used with civilians, firm but controlled. The tone that assumes reason will work. The old women did not answer with argument. They simply held their line, staring as if they were measuring distances, not listening to words. Avila signaled for us to widen and move around them to secure the perimeter. It was standard procedure. If the huts hid narcos, we needed angles. If these were locals, we could keep them behind us and avoid escalation. Panetta shifted beside me, and I saw sweat on his temples that had nothing to do with heat. We stepped. The old women did not move. Their stillness felt heavy, like a door that refuses to open. Ortega behind me made a sound in his throat. I did not look back, but I knew that sound. It is the sound a man makes when he believes fear is an insult. Avila told him to hold position. Ortega did not. He took 2 quick steps forward, lifted his rifle higher than needed, and put his finger to the trigger as if to prove that we were the only ones with power here. I remember thinking, a single mistake can turn a map into a grave. The shot cracked through the clearing. Ortega fired into the ground near one of the women. Dirt jumped. Wood splintered from a hut wall. The echo ran up the trees and came back thin. No one screamed. No one flinched. The old women did not even tilt their heads. They looked at Ortega the way you look at an insect that has landed on your food. Then, one of them moved. She crossed the space between them and Ortega in a straight line, not stumbling, not limping, not hesitating. It was not a run. It was a sudden arrival. Her black eyes stayed fixed on him. Ortega did not have time to step back. Her nails rose and came down once, and his shirt opened from collarbone to belly. The sound was wet and close. He fell backward, his rifle slipping from his hands, blood pouring in a sheet that made the dirt dark instantly. A sentence formed in my head, simple and final. The rules have changed. Avila shouted for us to fire. We did. The clearing exploded with muzzle flashes and splinters. Bullets tore through wood and kicked up dust. I fired in short bursts, trying to keep my breathing steady, trying to see a clear target. The old women moved between huts with sudden shifts, slipping behind corners, reappearing from another side. Never where my sights expected them to be. It felt like aiming at reflections on water. An old woman appeared closer than seemed possible, her nails grazing a trunk as she passed, carving grooves in the bark. I fired at her center mass. The rounds hit the tree behind her and through chunks of wood, but she kept moving as if the shots were weather. Avila ran to a fallen log for cover and ordered us to hold the entrance of the left hut. We tried to form a line, but the huts broke our angles. The old women used them like corridors. They did not crouch or crawl. They advanced straight, vanished behind a wall, and returned on a new line. It felt like they knew the clearing better than we did. From the middle hut, another figure stepped out, different from the rest. Taller, shoulders back, spine straight. Her nails were thicker and longer, like hooked blades. She walked across the dying fire pit, embers sliding aside under her feet, and she did not bother with cover. We fired at her. Bullets struck dirt and wood behind her, but none reached her. The space around her seemed slightly wrong, as if the air had learned a different geometry. She stopped a few meters away and spoke calmly. No one would leave. We would pay for crossing. Avila tried to reason with her the way you talk to someone holding a hostage. He said we were military, that we had orders, that we would leave, that nobody needed to get hurt. The tall one only watched him. Her black eyes did not reflect the sun. Behind her, the other women shifted in tiny increments, each step placing them at new angles, like pieces on a board. It hit me then that the huts were not shelter. They were set, arranged, and the skulls were not trophies. They were markers. The pouches at the door were not charms meant to protect us. They were counters, filled with something that knocked when they moved, teeth or stones or bone chips. Ortega had spilled first blood. and in that place every loud sound felt like an offering. Avila must have sensed it too, because his jaw tightened and his voice turned from negotiation to command. Panita took 2 steps back without meaning to. I could hear him breathing hard. A soldier to my right tried to move around her, to flank. Before he could, 2 old women slipped out from the sides of the huts. They attacked without sound. One raked her nails down his back in a single motion. His vest split, and he dropped to his knees as if the strings had been cut. He tried to turn his rifle, but his hands lost strength, and he folded forward into the dirt. Another man shouted and ran past me, telling me to cover the left. I pivoted and saw arms reach from inside the left hut. Hands seized a soldier by the shoulders and dragged him into the darkness like he weighed nothing. His boots kicked once, twice, then vanished. His rifle struck the door frame with a hollow knock and disappeared after him. I took 1 step toward the entrance, then stopped. Something moved on my flank. An old woman had appeared there, close enough that I could see deep cracks in her knuckles and the dull sheen of her nails. I backed away and fired. The rounds hit wood behind her, and she slipped away. Avila shouted for us to regroup, to pull back to a better position. It was too late. Men were dropping in scattered places, and the huts turned the clearing into a maze. The old women did not need to coordinate with words. They behaved like a net tightening, each one knowing exactly where the next gap would be. My radio crackled again, a soft pulse, then a longer hiss. For a moment I thought I heard a voice inside it. Not clear Spanish, not clear anything, just the suggestion of syllables. I shoved the radio tight against my vest as if pressure could silence it. Avila called my name and pointed toward a large boulder near the edge of the clearing. Cover, move. I sprinted, bullets snapping overhead, wood splinters stinging my cheek. I slid behind the rock and fired blind toward the huts. The shots answered with no effect. I could not tell if the old women were circling or waiting. When I dared to glance out, I saw 2 soldiers down near the fire pit. One held his neck, blood spilling between fingers. The other lay still, chest torn. Panetta was near Avila, trying to keep a line of fire, but every time they tried to retreat, an old woman appeared from the huts and forced them to change direction. The clearing no longer felt like open ground. It felt like a trap with walls made of wood and shadow. From behind the boulder, the fight sounded wrong. Gunfire should have rhythm. Commands, responses. What I heard was bursts, then gaps, then a single shout cut short. The huts kept swallowing people. Each time someone moved, an old woman appeared from a side angle and forced him back into the maze. Avila rose from his cover and sprinted toward a better position near a fallen trunk, shouting for us to consolidate. He did not make it. An old woman stepped from behind a tree as if she had been waiting for that exact path. Avila fired 3 times, fast and precise. The rounds struck the bark behind her and sent chips spinning. She did not slow. She hit him in the chest with both hands, not punching, not clawing, just striking as if she were shoving a door off its hinges. Avila flew backward into the hut wall and dropped to his knees. He tried to stand. The old woman seized him by the face. With one hand, I will never forget that image, his helmet strap pulled tight against his jaw, his arms scrambling for leverage, and her fingers gripping his cheeks as if his head was a handle. She dragged him toward the central hut entrance and into the dark. There was no final gunshot. There was no scream. It was as if the shadow inside the hut drank the sound before it could exist. Someone yelled to retreat. I think it was Pineda. The order meant nothing by then. We had no line, no orientation, no clear exit. A soldier bolted for the trail we came in on. 2 old women intercepted him. One hooked his arm with her nails. The other drove claws into his side. He stumbled forward and they hauled him into the brush, his boots carving furrows as if the ground itself was pulling him down. I leaned out and fired at them. Bullets snapped into trunks and ricocheted with high pings. The women did not even turn their heads. It felt like my bullets were being refused, like coins offered to a hand that stays closed. A body hit the ground near the fire pit and lay still. Another crawled and then stopped. The fire was there to witness. Panita found my position behind the boulder and dropped beside me. His eyes were wide, his face streaked with dust. He did not waste breath on questions. He pointed toward a gap in the trees on the far side of the clearing. A slope, rocks. A chance, he mouthed. Go. I shook my head, not in refusal, but in instinct. Leaving cover meant dying. Pina touched my shoulder hard. A command without sound. He lifted his rifle and stood, stepping out from the boulder as if he were larger than fear. He fired a long burst into the huts and ran, not toward safety, but sideways, drawing attention. He did it to buy me seconds. Courage is often just a decision to spend your life for someone else. I owe him for it. I broke from cover and sprinted toward the slope. The ground pitched upward and then down. Loose stones rolled under my boots. Branches slapped my face. Behind me I heard the drag of footsteps accelerating, not heavy but certain. Like a thing that knows it is faster. A shadow dropped from above. I glanced back just in time to see an old woman land on Panada. She came down from a branch with impossible force and drove him into the ground. He tried to twist, to bring his rifle up, but she pinned him with her weight and held his head by the hair and jaw. He kicked and scraped dirt, and then his movement shortened. She pressed his throat down until his hands went limp. She lifted her face and looked in my direction. Not at me, through me, like she had already decided where I would end up. That was the moment I understood another rule. The forest does not chase what it cannot find. It simply closes around it. I ran. The slope ahead was steep, layered with roots and stones. My lungs burned. Each breath felt like dragging air through hot cloth. I kept my rifle tight to my chest to stop it from banging, but it still thudded against my vest. I did not dare turn my head. I told myself, do not look back. Looking back is how stories end. A branch snapped under my foot and my body lurched. My palms slapped the ground for balance. That single hesitation was enough. Something moved at my side, a dry rush of cloth, and pain flashed along my left arm. An old woman had matched my pace and raked her nails across me like a blade. The cut opened instantly. Warm blood slid down to my elbow. I made a sound that I swallowed before it became a scream. I kept running because stopping to understand pain is a privilege. My arm burned and my fingers went numb, but my legs kept moving. The slope ended in a field of boulders, tall stones, stacked and split by time. I spotted a narrow crevice between two slabs, a crack just wide enough for a body if you turned sideways. I shoved myself into it, shoulders scraping rock, breath loud in my ears. The space squeezed my chest and forced my wounded arm against stone. I bit my tongue to keep from crying out. Blood dripped onto the dirt inside the crack. I pressed fabric to the cut, but the cloth soaked immediately outside. Stones clicked. Something climbed down. Slow and patient, I became a statue. I held my breath until my vision sparkled. I listened for the smallest shift of weight. A pair of feet stopped in front of the crevice. The skin on those feet looked like dried fruit folded and tough. Nails touched the rock. Click. Click. Then, a sound that made my teeth ache. Scrape. The nails dragged across the stone at the mouth of my hiding place. It was not a random scratch. It was a test, a deliberate tracing, as if the rock were paper and the nails were a pen. Dust fell in thin grains. The scrape came again, closer, and I realized with cold clarity that the rock was being marked. I did not move. I did not blink. I told myself a lie to stay alive. She cannot see me. She is only guessing. If I stay still, she will pass. The old woman tilted her head. I could not see her eyes, but I felt them. The air outside the crevice changed, thicker, like something leaning in to smell. Another scrape, then a pause long enough for my lungs to beg. Somewhere farther down the slope, another set of footsteps moved in a circle, searching other gaps. The woman in front of me scraped the rock one last time and stepped away. The feet retreated, not hurried as if she had decided she would return later. Time lost meaning. I counted my heartbeats and failed. When the surrounding sounds finally shifted upward, away from the boulders, I let air into my lungs in tiny sips. My arm throbbed in rhythm with my pulse. The cut stung with every movement. I slid out of the crevice and stayed low among the stones. The clearing above was hidden now. All I could see were trunks and sky. I moved downhill until I found a ledge that dropped into a ravine. It was not vertical, but steep enough that stepping would turn into falling. I looked back once. No shapes, no movement, just trees and the illusion of safety. I let myself go. The world became tumbling earth and impact. Rocks bruised my ribs. A branch tore my eyebrow. Dirt filled my mouth. When I finally stopped, I lay still for a second, listening for pursuit. Nothing. No dragging steps. No clicking nails. I got up anyway. Silence after terror is not comfort. It is a question. I pushed through brush until the trees thinned. My arm left droplets behind me. Every time I lifted my hand to part branches, pain lanced to my shoulder. I kept going until I reached a small rise where I could see farther downslope. Only then did I pull my radio out. My thumb shook as I keyed it. I gave a rough position. I said, "Our operation had been attacked." I said I was the only survivor. I did not mention old women. I did not mention claws. I used the kind of language that fits a report because reports are the only spells the military knows. The voice on the other end sounded confused. They asked, "Who attacked you?" "Armed group." "How many?" I said. "Unknown." I repeated my request for extraction. I heard paper rustling and someone else speaking softly near the operator. Then they confirmed they would send a team. I sat under a scrub bush on the rise and pressed my sleeve to my arm, trying to keep blood from draining out of me. The sun had shifted, and the light on the leaves looked normal again, almost gentle. That made it worse. I replayed Ortega firing into the dirt. I replayed the tall woman saying we would pay. I replayed the scrape of nails on stone. I realized something that felt like the beginning of a verdict. In that zone, crossing the line is one crime. Drawing blood is another. I had done both. Extraction came hours later, though time and shock stretches and folds. I saw movement first, men in uniform climbing toward my position. Weapons ready, eyes scanning the brush. They found me half sitting, half collapsed, my sleeves soaked dark. One of them swore when he saw the cut. Another asked where the rest were. I told him, "Gone." They wrapped my arm tight and guided me down. On the way, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting black eyes between trunks. There was nothing. The forest offered only branches. That absence made my skin crawl, like a room where someone just blew out a candle. At the staging point, questions started immediately. Who fired first? Where did they go? What did you see? I answered with facts that fit their world. We found huts. We made contact. We were attacked. My element was wiped out. I left out everything that would turn my statement into a psychiatric problem. I could see disbelief anyway. The way their faces tightened when I could not name a weapon or an enemy unit. They asked about the huts. I said they were strange, and there were human remains. That at least had a category. Someone wrote it down as cartel intimidation, or a ritual site. A higher officer told me to rest, then told me I would repeat the report later, then told me to keep my mouth shut outside official channels. I nodded, because nodding is easier than fighting when you are bleeding and empty. In the weeks that followed, I tried to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard nails on stone. I started avoiding radios. Static made my stomach seize. I asked for a transfer. Denied. I asked for leave. Delayed. When I finally filed for discharge, the paperwork moved faster than I expected. As if someone wanted the problem to walk itself out of the gate. In the markets near the foothills, old men mentioned a forbidden zone where Bruges lived. Women who made packs and kept watch over certain ridges. Others used the word nahuelis, not as a joke, but as a warning. The way you say a storm is coming. One vendor told me the huts were not huts. They were mouths. Built to feed a debt, he said. When strangers cross a boundary and spill blood, the place takes payment, and the survivor carries the receipt. I laughed at him, because if I did not laugh, I would have started believing that the mountains can own you like property. Months passed. The cut on my arm healed into a raised line. One night, while washing it, my fingers traced the scar and found something wrong. The wound was not a simple slash. It had corners. It had angles that met like the hooked loops I had seen on the hut wall. I turned my arm under the light and felt my throat tighten. The mark was a pattern, as if the nails had written instead of cut. In the corner of my room, an old field radio I kept out of habit sat on a shelf. Battery removed. Useless. It crackled anyway, a dry hiss that should not exist. I froze, soap dripping from my hand. The hiss pulsed twice, the same rhythm from the trail. Then a voice slid through, clear and calm, spoken close to the microphone. La zona recuerda. The radio went dead. The room stayed lit. I did not move for a long time. I waited for a second sentence, for a knock at the door, for anything that would prove it was a malfunction. Nothing came, only my own breath and the quiet scrape of something outside. Faint enough to doubt, sharp enough to recognize. If you ever walk in a place where the insects stop singing and the air smells like cold ash, turn around. If your radio crackles in steady pulses, do not answer, and if someone tells you a zone does not belong to you, believe them. Some borders are not drawn on maps, they are carved into rock, and they remember your name.